Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those of you still on the fence figuring things out, we are live, courtesy of Arcaicskidz on Derailed. This is Matt Keck. Matt Keck is a young, up-and-coming podcaster, young libertarian. He's trying to figure things out. Apparently, he is more upset with the Libertarian National Party than I am, so I'm interested to talk to him. Matt, tell everyone who you are, what you're about, where to find you, what to do.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I reached out to you via DM just because I've been listening to a few of your episodes here and there since you crossed my radar a few weeks ago. And I've been doing a couple podcasts for a little bit now. The one that's in the ticker on the video here is the Obey podcast, and that's a solo podcast I do. I'd consider myself more of like an anarcho-capitalist or a right-wing anarchist. But I used to be a libertarian. And I also do a show called Beyond Talking Points, where it's myself and a person who considers themselves more of an ANCOM, or like he's kind of a Marxist. And we argue about all sorts of things. We've done like 50 episodes that are like an hour of us talking about like our philosophical roots, or it'll be something like actually in the news. So I've done a lot of that stuff, but I haven't actually reached out to a lot of people in the liberty community. I've done a lot of stuff on my own. And I've argued with people, but that's a lot different than talking to other people who agree with me about things like what should the LP be doing and stuff like that. And that's been like really dominant since, well, especially since the Mises Caucus started kind of rising up, and then with Jo Jorgensen's, her attempt in 2020, that there was a ton of backlash there. And then there's just a lot of people who have a lot of different opinions that need to be hashed out.
I agree with that. I guess I would say that, one of the things that got me focused, or I guess because I had left the Libertarian Party and I'm back now, I'm coming back, is, guys like Reed Coverdale, David Fite, Jeremy Todd, they pulled me back in with their Liberty Unity thing, which apparently I learned today, David Fite stole that from Magnus.
Okay.
so that's fun. But the point is that I guess I look at it that even ANCAPs, ANCOMs, we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And so, power of numbers might work in our favor if we can actually come together. But I don't know. You don't seem like you think Libertarian National has the power to pull that one off.
Well, So I think what my biggest gripe might be, and it's something that I think you'll sympathize with a bit, but I think I just have to kind of formulate it in a way that gets the idea across. I'm kind of worried that a lot of the positive people in the LP right now that are saying like, yeah, I identify with the Mises Caucus, I want everybody to get together. We all agree on 90% of the things. We all agree that Republicans are warmongers. We all agree that Democrats are terrible in economics. Why don't we come to consensus?
But to be fair, Republicans are terrible in economics too.
Yeah. That's a whole nother. Yeah, we're not going to unpack that right now. But right. the point is, like, if you and me talk, or me, and even if I like had talked to David Fite or Reed Coverdale, we agree on like the majority of things. The issue is I'm concerned that in the pursuit of political gain with the LP, we're going to end up actually rerunning Jo Jorgensen, not literally, but in spirit. And I think the best example of this is the people who are kind of jumping on the Tulsi train because she's great on war.
Right.
And that like deeply concerns me, because as great as Tulsi can be on war, which like, sure, a lot of like almost every politician in DC is a terrible warmonger with blood on their hands. Like you and I would agree on that. And Tulsi isn't. So that's like one positive thing. But on every economic issue,
she's also great on drugs.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. But when you talk about anything in economics, it's like a lot of people on the left have this idea that when you're talking about economics, you're talking about businesses. But when you and I talk about econ, I think you and I conceptualize it where economics is about our freedom as individuals to peacefully interact.
100%.
And Tulsi's wrong on that. And like, that's a huge deal to me. And I don't think that could be understated enough. Like, she thinks that if you want to hire a person at a certain wage that they agree to, but it doesn't meet her standards, then you are like an evil person, right? Like that's what the
Yes.
$15 minimum wage argument is. And
Yes.
that's dehumanizing, and it's antithetical to everything the liberty movement stands for.
Well, to be fair, I think me and you, well, I mean, I don't know. We did have a chance to discuss last night a little bit prior to this show, but I think the minimum wage is retarded and should be abolished.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
And people say, well, then they're going to have people working for 40 cents an hour. And I go, okay. Like, well, first of all, no, they won't. You know what I mean? But second of all, okay, if they could, then to me, that means that prices are definitely going to have to come down. No one's going to work for wages that don't meet their basic need. You know what I mean?
Well, and I love talking about the minimum wage because, and we talked about this a little bit the other day when we were chatting, but the minimum wage conversation opens up like 100 meta conversations about what the main political parties don't understand about any government policy they pushed, in their existence.
Well, they don't understand economics at all.
Yeah, but it's the whole issue of unintended consequences. Like the minimum wage, it leads to like 1 million of them, and it can seem like this thing where Bernie Sanders goes up there, and you know this, but I guess I just feel obligated to say it. But he goes up there and he gives this stump speech, and he's like, obviously this is the cure-all, and only rich people are against it. And you and I both know that like no 17-year-old is going to get a job in Alabama if there's a $15 federal minimum wage, because we're just
never going to happen.
Yeah,
never going to happen.
So there are things like that where it's like, okay, I get that Tulsi Gabbard has name recognition. I get that you guys are afraid of being laughed at and you want political acceptability because you want to bring in people. You want to be a party that can get 10% instead of 5%. But even though you get the unity, you're just going to get another compromise candidate if you want somebody like Tulsi Gabbard as your figurehead. And I don't think that's something that anybody who's actually liberty oriented in the way that most of us would consider ourselves liberty oriented want that. So I feel like we're kind of like stepping into a trap because Tulsi Gabbard and Justin Amash are like the politically available people right now.
Okay. That's fair. I get that argument. I would say this is my, and I've said this before. I don't think the Libertarian Party, I think the Libertarian Party, whoever they run for 2024, should be cannon fodder. It should be a good person, a good, great, libertarian type candidate, but cannon fodder, because you're not going to win. You know what I mean? But you need someone that can build the stage. You need someone that they can go, oh, hey, this person is left of center on some things, right of center on other things. Like, you gotta build that base, because 2028 you might actually have a decent shot. But I don't think the Libertarian Party needs to focus on what. It doesn't matter. Like, you're not going to win the presidential candidate. Stop it. Like, that's ridiculous. The only reason you need to run them is to keep ballot access, and that's it. So they need to be cannon fodder. My entire work that I'll be doing over the next 4 years is for mayors, city councilors, school boards. Like, these are the people we need to focus our efforts on, in my opinion. Will Libertarian National do that? No, but that's not their job. Their job is to look national, which is the only nice thing I'm basically going to say about them right now, other than Karen Ann, who is just a badass. So
I get what you're saying about how 2024 is. You get a good candidate out there, you build the base, you set the stage. I think the voice in the room that I'm trying to be is I'm just trying to remind people that in the attempt to build that platform and opening up the party as a big tent party, you're setting yourself up for a permanent compromise party. So a lot of people have this view of electoral politics that the person who wins ends up being like a watered down candidate for whatever your ideology is. So this is the people who like, of the left, like Bernie Sanders is running, and then there's like 8 people who are establishment Democrats, and then they all drop out the day before a Super Tuesday, and they all endorse Joe Biden because Joe Biden's the only one that's electable. Bernie Sanders isn't because well, one they don't
because they're cowards.
Yeah, but part of the story that they at least say out loud, like people at 538 that do like election predictions would say that somebody like Joe Biden is more electable, or that's the conventional wisdom. Yeah. I don't think that's accurate. And unfortunately, the person I don't either. The person I have to the person who planted that in my head was, of course, a person who's awful, which is Ted Cruz. He's the one who I remember first hearing say something along the lines of, "Why would I be a watered down Republican? Like I'm not trying to get Democrats to vote for me. They're just going to vote for the Democrat if they're Democrat. He's going to be the."
I mean, he's not entirely wrong now.
So I think that needs to be applied to the people who are actually the good people with the good ideas, which is the libertarians. And I think instead of doing the watered down person who isn't afraid to, I don't want to put up a person who's afraid to talk about lockdowns. That's just, there's no point of doing that.
I agree with that.
If we're going to have somebody on the national stage, they need to be screaming about how that's one of the greatest offenses to individual liberty in the United States history, at least in the last 2 decades. So that's the kind of thing
I might even push it a little further than 2 decades.
Yeah, I had to hedge it because I could see somebody quoting me out of context and then saying things about Jim Crow.
Whatever. Just tell him to shut up. Let's talk about Jim Crow for a minute. And so I'm sure you saw the tweet from LP Kentucky, right? They dropped that. And people flipped out. They wanted to talk about, oh, you're not Jewish, you can't say that, you're comparing things, whatever. Man, I just saw it different. I'm like, well, yeah, it's not a matter of is it as bad, it's a matter of can it be as bad. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I just want to know.
So I have, so there's kind of 2 things there. That there's a specific instance that happened where they said an anecdote that could be seen as offensive. And then there's the whole cultural analysis of why are we in a world where we're super concerned about a bad analogy? I for one, I'm not sure if you're familiar with and if you are, this might actually kind of paint my, it could paint what I'm saying in a new light. But if you're familiar with Aaron from the Timeline Earth podcast, he could be, okay. He's kind of, I don't want to say he's a collapsitarian, but he's definitely a person who is intentionally polarizing when he talks to people on the left or on the right. And it's kind of like, I don't think democracy works very well. I don't think it's a good system. I think it's
democracy
unfair.
Is the worst form of government.
Yeah, I think it just gives I think it gives a false sense of legitimacy to a government that's authoritarian. And I don't think even in theory, I don't even think it works. I'm not a fan of it. So if people are going to get offended about a bad analogy in the culture and then call people racist, to some extent, I think that's a good thing because then they think everybody's racist and then democracy doesn't make sense. If half the country is literally
I don't want a bunch of racists telling me what to do.
Well, that's the whole thing with Trump supporters. If half the country voted for Trump and all the Trump supporters are deplorables, then how can you believe in our democratic system? Because you think half the country's racist. Why should they be making decisions about your life? So when the LP in Kentucky makes an analogy that's related to the Holocaust and people get offended, it's kind of like, get over it. One, it's just the ethos of get over it. You could be a person who interprets somebody in a good lighted way and goes, that was a little bad of an analogy, but that doesn't indicate racism. That's what any normal person would say.
But if they're anti-Semitism is what they were being accused of.
Well,
which I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll let you finish your point, and then I have a question for you.
This might get to your next question, but I don't think that there's any legitimate way of thinking that is deeply embedded anti-Semitic language in a way that is honest. But then if the people want to be dishonest about it, then it's like, well, you should let them because if you want them to think that we're the most evil people, then their government, having this centralized authority power where people like you and I could vote and then legislate their lives should be something they're afraid of and should be something they shouldn't want. And then we should tell them that. It's like, if you think I'm Hitler, then maybe you should think that people like me shouldn't vote. And
Yeah.
then and then that opens up a whole can of worms that they have to reckon with if they like big government.
Well, I mean, you follow me, you know, I do that on Twitter all the time where I say these people are allowed to vote. That's terrifying. And I do it for a reason. It's because like they say the most ridiculous things. And I'm talking everybody. Like just people say crazy things that don't make, they're just nonsensical. And you're like, what? Why are these people allowed to vote? This is scary. It's not legit scary. I don't give a shit because, you know, I can protect myself. But what I was going to say is anti-Semitism is one of those things that baffles me in a way. And also when people refer to anti-Semitism as racism. So I'm confused in this in two ways, and I always have been my entire life, and I don't care who takes this out of context and gets mad because some fight me. So Jews are the only people that get their own ism, essentially, anti-Semitism. Like we don't have Africanism or Indianism, or we don't have any of that, right? It's specific to just Jewish people alone. Also, Jews are less a race of people than a religion of people. So I don't know how racism even works when it comes to Jewish people, which is a faith. It's not, I mean, you know what I mean? Now I understand that some people are like, no, we are a race of people. And I'm like, meh. I mean, genetically speaking, you're not. Like, I don't understand that.
Well, okay, so I think there are two layers of that conversation. So I think the more interesting layer to investigate is when accusations of anti-Semitism actually end up coming out in our discourse. And if you're in real life talking to normal people that you're friends with, and if there are other people of color and something happens, you might have an actual conversation about if somebody did was racist or something like that. In private settings, I never hear of people actually being concerned with anti-Semitism. Now you'll see it come up in a similar way of like as like other types of racism that happens. So like when Jews get targeted in New York, you hear about that. And any common person, like,
but you also hear it's white supremacy, even though the video shows a very black white supremacist.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with you on that too, usually. But like if I'm talking to my family about that, it falls in the category of any other type of like bias or prejudice or racism, and it's like, okay, well, whatever, that's fine, and it usually is applying to Orthodox Jewish people. But it seems like in political discussions, especially about Israel, or even really about any time a Jewish person comes up in conversation, it's weaponized, and I don't use that term loosely because I know that's kind of a buzzword, but it's like intentionally for the reasons you laid out. It's like a confounding thing. It's like, is it a race? Is it a religion? And it's this catch-all that people who don't believe in anything, they don't wear anything that would identify them as Orthodox. They don't actually believe in any type of religion, but they consider themselves Jewish. All of a sudden, they're kind of playing a card where you can conflate these things that are different because of the history of anti-Semitism. And it's like, obviously very deeply bad things happen to people because they're like Orthodox Jewish. Like you'll see them get targeted. Like that goes without saying, I think, which is why I don't even really want to have to qualify by saying that. But then there's like these clear examples of like a bait and switch, because it's like, oh, I can push my agenda because everybody subconsciously will now link this person with Hitler. And this is the reason why like ANCAPs are considered almost like alt-right extremists. And it's like, because being edgy, it's in a lot of people who are very mainstream's mind is the same as being racist, right? And you and I know that we can make an edgy joke and it has no indication on our prejudices towards other people of different backgrounds.
No, all my prejudices are internal. I keep them there.
Yeah. Well, and there's just so much to unpack there on any discussion about like race, though, where where it's all conflated. And this is why this is one of those things where how I just mentioned, if half the country's a Trump supporter and those people are racist, then democracy doesn't make sense. But you know how like every government policy is arguably like it disproportionately impacts people of different races, and that happens every time because racial breakdowns of demographics aren't the same as our income breakdowns.
Mhm.
So anything that affects poor people in a certain way disproportionately affects black people. And so you can argue anything's racist or anything's
Well,
not
I don't know if
racist.
that's actually true. I mean, you can statistically, there are a lot more poor white people than black people.
Well,
But when you break it down by demographic, yes, then you're correct. They're more likely to be poor by demographic.
yeah, and this is what I talk about a lot on the solo show I do, is because I end up reading a bunch of mainstream news, like I'll read the Wall Street Journal,
Oh,
and
you
then
poor bastard.
yeah, and you'll read these terrible articles that say things like the Federal Reserve is going to keep interest rates low because that helps black people more, and like the reasoning behind
That doesn't help any people.
yeah, well, I'm gonna get there. I'll get there.
My apologies.
But their whole argument is when the rates are low, then you're stimulating the economy. You and I would say that's an artificial boom, right?
Yes.
But they're like, well, if you run the economy hot, then once the economy booms, you get unemployment lower and lower, and the last people who are getting jobs are the lowest educated people of color usually. So if you run the economy hot for longer, then those people end up getting jobs. So then they make it a racial it's like you have to do it for this reason that's based on race, and now it's a racialized issue. And then you and I are sitting here and we're like, but inflation is like deeply it affects poor people way worse than rich people. Like
Yes.
all the rich people are the one profiting off this Federal Reserve policy, and like all the poor people lose their jobs during the bus when everything falls apart. But the rich people just keep all their stuff and keep their executive positions. And we're like, maybe it doesn't work that way, but that's the narrative, right?
Yeah, you're like, what the hell's going on, man? Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand. No, I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I've been trying to warn friends and family that, like, man, I'm telling you, inflation. Not only is it coming, it's here. Like, we're seeing it. I can see it all over the marketplace. And it is so not only is inflation going to just decimate the poors, because it is, but also these eviction and this moratorium on rent and eviction is about to run out. Like, that's going to run out. They can't just keep doing it forever. They're going to have to figure it out. I read an article today. I can't remember where it was from. Doesn't really matter. 30 plus million people are behind over 6 months on their rent or their mortgage.
Yeah, it's a house of cards.
That's going to be a humanitarian disaster if we can't figure that mess out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
and people go, well, I mean, the government's going to have to figure out how to pay for that. And I went, the government caused it. Why do you people keep going back to the idiots that did it? They caused it. Why do you think they can save you from the shit that they do all the time? Well, that makes sense to me.
And this raises a question. I thought of this. I thought of this yesterday, and I was gonna save it for when we talk on my show. But I'm gonna ask you a question on your show, and I think it's something that I think you should probably ask, like, every person that you'd consider, I guess, red-pilled or somebody that is a libertarian. And it's how much of this do you think they're in on? And I don't mean that in a conspiratorial way, but it's like, do you think they're high on their own farts? Like, do you think that they actually think these Federal Reserve policies work, or do you think that they know the impending doom? You know?
No, I think they know that the house of cards is going to collapse. And I think what they're basically doing is them and all their friends are collecting all the silver as the Titanic sinks. And they're going to get on the lifeboats and leave everybody else in the ocean. I think that's what's happening. Like, oh, love you forever, Jack. That's what's happening.
See, I think there is a lot of, like, true believers. And I think, like, if you listen to Bloomberg or you read the Wall Street Journal, I think everybody that is saying the words, like, I think the Federal Reserve Chair, I think all those people believe that what they're doing works.
Janet Yellen does not believe anything she does.
Really?
I guarantee you. I read her dissertation from when she got her degree. She doesn't believe any of this shit. She does this because it pays the bills and she's collecting silver, buddy. I'll send it to you. I've got
Okay.
it linked somewhere. I'll send it to you. Read her dissertation. I'm telling you, this woman does not believe this shit. She
Well,
never did.
So Janet Yellen, and if anybody, I guess I'll give the quick background. She's the former head of the Federal Reserve. She's the current Secretary of the Treasury.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Yeah. The so right now Jerome Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve.
Mhm.
I guess
also terrifying.
Yeah. I do think Janet Yellen is kind of a uniquely evil person. Well, actually, I might be using the word unique too soon, but I would love to read her dissertation because it might indicate how
once you
is.
read it, you won't say you'll unique works, uniquely evil.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why I really I really went from her being like one of those typical evil technocrats to her being a mouthpiece of our disgusting terrorist organization that we call the government. And yes. that happened when she pretty much said that she wants to regulate Bitcoin. And then I was kind of like, okay, one, I'm glad that's not really possible, but it's concerning because a lot of normal people who aren't super into Bitcoin aren't as careful about it as you are. So it's like a lot of people have Bitcoin in an off-system wallet, and the government can't figure that stuff out. They aren't going to be able to track and identify it unless you do some things that are really lazy. But a lot of people have their cryptocurrency through Robinhood or through like Coinbase.
And I have stuff on Coinbase and I have stuff on crypto.com, and that's fine. But the bulk of my crypto assets are completely off. Like, good luck. You know what I mean?
Well, see, like one of the things that concerns me is that there's this really so okay. I'm not. I know you're gonna have Pete Quinones on your show in the future. Hopefully, I don't know if I spoiled that, but
yeah, we're working on it. We're gonna get there.
So if anybody's familiar with people like Pete Quinones and God, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Vin Armani and people like them, they have a subscription. Like they have a newsletter of sorts that they kind of like put out like a 40-page report every month, and they at some point I found out about a website called BlockFi, and it's a really cool website. It's pretty much like a bank account for your crypto, and they pay you interest on it every month, and it's like really high compared to like what you get at a checking account or even a savings account because you get like 0.5% a year.
Wait, do they still give you interest at checking? Like, I didn't think that was a thing anymore.
No. Well, like I'm pretty sure my credit union savings interest, and this in the savings is like a fraction of a percent. Like, it doesn't even matter. It's negligible.
But it's like, why would I put money in this? Doesn't make sense.
But so I find this crypto site, and it's awesome in my mind because I'm like, oh, cool, you can put money in USD coin. It's a stable coin, or it's at least as stable as the dollar is. And then they'll give me like 7% interest. This is awesome. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, well, I have to give these people my important information, like all my identifiable information. And the government's going to track this down if I make any notable money. And I'm
that is the downside.
Yeah. So it's like, this is what Janet Yellen wants. She wants people to get into crypto, but then she wants them to want the 8% return that they'd get like they would on the stock market. And then it's like, well, they can still tax it. And if they can still tax it and they can still track it enough, then it's not gonna usurp anything.
Well, I mean, I'm okay with this, and let me explain why. I'm okay with them doing all of the nonsense that they're planning, but here's why. The normies are going to go, oh, so this Bitcoin and stuff, this is a good investment. I'm gonna throw some coin in that so they can get that interest, right? Mm-hmm. And then the rest of us that have a brain don't have our shit in there, but they're driving up the price. Mm-hmm. So when it comes time, I'm like, oh, I need to offload a Bitcoin, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to get 200K out of that thing, like right quick, and be like, oh, okay, nice. And sure, okay, they'll go, oh, he sold one Bitcoin. They don't know how many Bitcoins one has, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of okay with it because the normies will drive up the price.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so a lot of things like Bitcoin kind of fall in a category of the stuff that makes me hopeful. It's the stuff that could be used to subvert subvert government control. And currently, you can already use Bitcoin to subvert government control as long as you're associated with another person who that's their like end goal. Right. But I guess the concern I have is I was kind of hopeful that widespread adoption of crypto would lead to a ton of people subverting it. and you can already see the ways that it's been co-opted.
Yeah, it's not working.
Yeah, so it's kind of sad that's how I see it going, where it's like, yeah, it's a new thing, and you could still use it to subvert it if you want to, but most people who are going to be using it in the future as it gets adopted, won't use it for that purpose, and it'll be easily tracked unless you still go out of your way. But you are right. Like, I'm glad I put money in it last year because people it looks like it's a thing that's sticking around.
Yeah.
And if they're going to drive it up, then it's like, I'll make money off that if they want me to. If they're going to make my assets more valuable,
that's how I look at it. I'm looking at it long term. I'm like, okay, well, the normies are getting in, and then these crazy people are like, well, we got to regulate it. And it's like, okay, whatever. My outlook is just, and this is, and I'm not giving anyone financial advice, so don't take that. But I'm telling you, my outlook is just stack sats before the regulation comes, and then just hang on to it. You know what I mean? Because these normies are going to drive the price through the roof, because that's what they do, because they're NPCs and they don't know what the hell's going on in the world. And you cannot explain it to them. Michael Malice is very good on this point. You cannot explain people. You cannot get a blue-pilled person to listen to your point. There is no point in even putting forth the effort.
Yeah,
because they will not hear you.
Well, so we talked about this a little bit, but it kind of wraps into everything about how we should try to go about convincing people. And that point alone is the reason why I don't think the LP should crave the basic. So, like, how should I put this? You have Justin Amash. He has name recognition. A bunch of people think he's a very respectable guy, but it's not.
I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, I'm not either. And it's like, sure, he has the acceptability, but you're not going to convince people with the Justin Amash. I think the best we can hope for is getting people with a radical message, because I think that radical message it's not just that it's a more correct message that we agree with more. I think that's what shakes people. I think you have to really throw people out of their NPR deep end if you're going to have any chance of getting to them. And I don't think you're going to get to them the overwhelming majority of the time. But I mean, I will tell you this, and I mentioned it to you when we talked before, but like in 2016, I voted for Trump because I was like a right-wing libertarian. And I was like, well, he's not Hillary. Woo, I'm going to vote for him still. He's right. At the time, I thought he was right on like two things. So I'm like, well, two's more than zero. I'll vote for him.
Yeah.
But like before I even voted for Trump, I was a person who got my news from like two right-wing radio hosts at NPR. And I didn't have disgust towards NPR.
Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity.
No, it wasn't that bad. I'm not a boomer, so they've always made me. I've never had an affinity towards them. No,
just kidding.
Yeah, but
hey, look, you say whatever you want. Rush Limbaugh, he helped freedom in America. I will say that forever. Well, he was a boomer, sure, but there was a lot of shit that came out of that guy's mouth that, like, I completely agreed with.
Well, and this is kind of like, if we're
going to Hannity on there, then.
Well, if we're going to be incrementalists, like, and push people like Justin Amash, I feel like that's like how I feel about Ben Shapiro, where, and then this because I'm from my generation, but like, I was on the first train of the clickbait Ben Shapiro video where he owns Piers Morgan, and he's like, the Second Amendment, here's the Constitution, and I was like, whoa, he made that.
Ben Shapiro does not actually believe the Second Amendment.
And I agree with you. I'm not going to defend Ben Shapiro, but what I will say is, if you listen to NPR and then you listen to somebody who completely disagrees with NPR, at least Ben Shapiro's on the side of, dude, the narratives that NPR push are just lies.
Oh yeah. And that's fair.
And as much as I don't agree with him, it's like, if I'm going to pick somebody to listen to Ben Shapiro or NPR, if somebody listens to Ben Shapiro for a while, they are pretty primed to agree with us, because a lot of our stances are just Ben Shapiro, like a lot of light Ben Shapiro stances. If you take them to their reasonable conclusion that makes sense, you end up as an ANCAP, because Ben Shapiro will argue against the minimum wage, and then it's like, so we should abolish it, and then he would probably agree with that. And if you push him on economics,
I think he'd hesitate a little on the abolish it. But yeah, I mean, if you pushed him, he might be like, yeah, you're right, let's get rid of it.
I think if in private you made him go to the logical conclusion of a lot of his views, he would end up being a small government statist, except he's a warmonger. And
Right.
unfortunately, in Western media, no matter what you listen to, you don't get honest coverage of the news unless you're listening to like Scott Horton and going out of your way to listen to alternative
Which,
news
by the
coverage.
way, shout out to Scott Horton. Everyone should follow him no matter what.
So Scott Horton's awesome because I'm terrible with names, right? So if I'm an American,
And you remember his, so cool.
yeah, but like if you're American and you're trying to follow Middle Eastern foreign policy, it's like I'm not trying to be offensive, but a lot of names blend together, and it's like I cannot follow all these groups. Scott Horton has this memory and this way of putting things together that he makes sense of it on the spot, even if that's like your blind spot.
Right.
And he's made a lot of that stuff click for me.
Well, I actually do follow Al Jazeera.
Oh, okay.
I do. I mean, I'm sorry. I need to know what's going on in the world, and I know CNN and Fox News are not going to tell me. I mean, they're gonna throw out their little shade, right? Like, oh, this thing is happening or whatever. But Al Jazeera, like, how sad is it that I need to follow Australian news, British news, the Daily Mail, and Al Jazeera for me to actually know what's going on in the fucking world? This is ridiculous.
Well, so that's kind of my whole opinion on trying to understand news, and I think I kind of take it seriously. But I'm a big on audio person, so like whenever I'm doing anything, I'm listening to a podcast or something.
Right.
So I almost think that the correct way.
Me too. My wife bitches all the time that I have something in my ear.
like anytime I live in the city, I'm walking places, like I'm always listening to stuff, and it's probably bad because I'll read books that are about how you need to like have time to think, and that's what people used to do before we had these damn smartphones,
Yeah.
but like I kind of like it, and I think it's not that the truth is somewhere in the middle, but it's more of you need to know what angles people are taking on things, or else you don't get it. So if you only listen to Dave Smith and Tom Woods, it's like, yeah, I agree with them on everything. But you have to have the perspective of knowing what boomer cons are saying, and you need to have the perspective of knowing what Bloomberg is saying. I think that's at least helpful to me. So I'll listen to like
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I'll listen to like Politico's podcasts, and like I think Politico's is kind of trash. I would never give them my money or anything. And I disagree with like the way they form their narratives, but seeing how they form their narratives and then push them is like very valuable.
No, yeah, absolutely. 100% on that. I agree with that. My outlook is that I think that Bloomberg and they're going to lie. Because it's a narrative, and that's what they're pushing. And I mean, I'm sure Al Jazeera is too. I'm sure that One America News. That's what they're all doing. They're all pushing somehow a bit of their own agenda. That's fine. But you take places like, I like the upstart news organizations in America now, because they're saying, you literally have one on YouTube called Right Wing, right? Like, they're just in your face. This is what we are. We 100% agree with the Republican Party, and so you know what you're going to get there, right? But it doesn't make every one of their stories wrong. If you subscribe to the Daily Wire, like you mentioned, Ben Shapiro, right? You know that's right wing. They openly admit it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean they're wrong. Blaze is the same way, like Glenn Beck's thing or whatever. You know what I mean? So there's a bunch of that. What pisses me off is you have people like CNN, Vice, HuffPo, Vox that are like, oh, just bringing you the news. It's like, no, you're not. That's the shit that you ever not. No, I'm sorry. 95% of the shit you put out is just your opinion.
Well, and this is why I think this is why I always call it NPR. Like NPR is the greatest offender to me by far, and it's because everybody listens to NPR, and it's like partially, very small bit of it, but still partially taxpayer funded.
Because they're driving through the desert, and it's the only station that works on your car radio.
It could be because I recently graduated college like a few years back, but there are so many like pseudo intellectual people who are like on the left that are like, I'm an informed citizen, because I listen to NPR.
I listen to NPR.
And it's like, congrats, you heard the highlights of like whatever was on the news, and then they ask each other questions in that NPR voice. And it's like, I know I don't have the NPR voice. Even if I had all the right ideas, I wouldn't be on NPR. I don't sound like I'm on NPR. They have to have this certain soothing. It's like something out of Brave New World. It's like designed to be like, oh, this is
that's true.
It's like, this is the smart person voice. This is the authoritative but soothing, relaxing voice. And here's the message you're supposed to agree with. And it's like the most evil thing. And everybody who listens to that is like, when they go and vote, they're like, I am smart. I can vote. I know more than the Republicans. I know more than the people I disagree with. I'm enlightened. And I sit here and I'm listening to a ton of podcasts. I listen to a ton of audiobooks, and I think about it, and I'm like, I don't know enough to vote. like I'm like, I don't know anything about agriculture policy. I don't know anything about like
people should have to take a test.
Yeah, but I think endemic to our ideology is like, since we don't believe in central planning, it's like, how can I be in a position to elect the right official to tell people what they should do on their farms? And it's like, because that apparatus shouldn't exist, which is why nobody should be able to even vote, because nobody has the knowledge.
Yeah, well, like you're gonna put 10 people in a room and 6 of them are gonna tell me how to run my farm. That seems kind of stupid.
Yeah, well, and like,
especially if you don't, if 5 of those 6 people don't own a farm or know shit about one, like what are you doing? Like, what are you talking about? This is retarded. Like, get the hell out of here.
I'm putting together something in my head right now as we're talking about this, but I think that this is why there's all the jokes about how every libertarian is kind of autistic. And I think part of the reason why, is because to get libertarianism, you have to not agree with normal people and then be upset that they want to force things on other people. Because if you agree with the hive mind, then it's like, oh, why would anybody ever care about something being forced on him? But like, imagine there were 10 people and you're voting on what movie to watch or something like that.
Right.
It's like, if 6 of these people vote for a Marvel movie, I'm going to kill myself. Like, I'm not sitting through a 2.5-hour PG-13, CGI fest, and none of the jokes are going to be funny. I'm just going to sit there and be in pain. I'm going to be like, and this is 150 minutes, and they spent $50 million on this. It's like, no, I want to watch
50, not even close.
Yeah,
$500 million.
Yeah, and it's like, no, you know what I want to watch? I want to watch like a $2 million scary movie that's going to give me nightmares for 2 weeks, because that's what I want out of a movie. And it's like all those people, like how can you imagine?
You want to go back to like the Blair Witch Project? Yeah,
exactly.
Like 3 teenagers and like $13,000, and they're like, we can do something with this.
Yeah, I'd much rather watch that over any Marvel movie that's ever been made, and I'm not ashamed to say that.
Well, I mean, that's fine. I'm gonna push back. I like the Marvel movies. I didn't like Endgame. I thought it was trash. And I didn't like Captain Marvel. I thought that was trash. But I liked them. I thought they did well with them for the most part. So, but we're allowed to disagree. Mm-hmm. That's the fun part about having these conversations is you're wrong and I'm right. So just deal with it. But when I'm on your show, you'll be right and I'll be wrong. And that's how it works.
I have plenty of unpopular movie of opinions on movies. And I go and see a lot of...
Well, let's do that. That's real fun. Real fun. Just for fun, because this show is called Derailed, and that's what it means is we're gonna like go off the rails. What is your favorite movie, and why is Molly Ringwald in it?
No,
you don't even know who that is.
No, I don't. That's sad too. It's worse because I would even consider myself for my age a person who watches a lot of movies that are older too. But. I have really niche taste. Like, I don't know if you watch scary movies at all.
I don't care. I watch whatever.
See,
it doesn't really matter.
See, like you have a very normal opinion on it. Like that's what
I'm
so
very
many
into
people
space
say.
Movies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, like a lot of my favorite movies are like really weird, scary movies. So like Hereditary is a movie that came out a couple years ago, and you got like satanic cults, and it's like very gory, and it's like actually horrifying, but it's also a family drama, and it's like weirdly well made. And I went and saw it in theaters, and I saw the trailer, and I thought it looked awful. And then I went in, and I was like, oh my God. That was like one of the most shocking events of my life. So it's like stuff like that, but it's like I've never been wowed by a lot of big budget movies. Like I'm sure I'm going to see the new King Kong movie in a week, and I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to be like, whoa, this is a lot of corporate sludge.
Probably. You know? I mean, but I'm still going to watch it because it's King Kong.
Yeah, well, so, and I say all this and I'm a hypocrite because I have like one of those AMC monthly passes where I can go all the time. And it's just because it's something to do because everything else is illegal in the city I live in. so I might as well go to the movies.
Yeah, well, I don't have any movie theaters in my city now because they're illegal. So, no, for real, like they've been gone for over a year, and they're not coming back. Like they're gone.
Well, this is the thing that drives me nuts, and then this one we're going to argue. But we're not going to argue. We're going to agree about lockdowns. But I'm shocked, but I don't think you are shocked that about how few people were woken up by the lockdowns, because all the people who go out there and they argue about the most dispossessed people in society need help, close down all the businesses for a year, and then like I'm in the city, and then I walk like a mile to the grocery store. And on that walk, there are like 3 restaurants I would go to like every now and then that like don't exist anymore. Or they're like just empty places. And especially because of the riots that happened last year too, like a ton of places got totally trashed. Mm-hmm. This is funny, but like the only state run, because I'm in Pennsylvania where the state runs every liquor store in the state. The only one that doesn't walk distance to my house is closed now because as far as I could tell, it got totally decimated by the riots. And then they just decided like, yeah, we're just going to leave that building vacant.
No, it is not.
Yeah. And I'm like,
let's don't refill it for them to come back.
Yeah, but as far as I know, like that building is never coming back. It's just not a location anymore. And it's like, well, now I can't walk to get any hard alcohol if I wanted to. And but aside from the that loss, like a bunch of small businesses run by probably very normal people have gone out of business. My favorite college bar by the college I live by, like just went out of business and closed at the end of February, and they have 2 other locations in Jersey, but it's like the one Philadelphia location. They're like, yeah, we're not renewing our lease.
Yeah, but I don't care about the 2. Like, 'cause some people maybe had more than one or whatever. Like, my former neighbor he owned a couple of Subway locations. Owned a Costa Vida. I don't know if you know what Costa Vida is, but Subway. Everyone knows what the hell Subway is. And even he was just brutalized by this. People. Subways, for the most part, are not drive-through restaurants. You have to go in. You know what I mean? Costa Vitas are the same way. You go in because it's like set up like a buffet. You walk in, kind of you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you tell them, I want this and I want that and whatever, and they put it all together for you. He managed to survive through all of it, but only because he was good with his money for the last 25 years, which now all his savings are gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And now we're finally getting to a point he's allowed to have people in his businesses again. Man, no. When they originally said, oh, we're going to have 15 days to slow the spread, I was like, oh, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Because everyone was going to be on board, but I knew it. Man, we'll talk about it off camera. But I made it more than clear this is not going to be 15 days. These people are going to burn this shit to the ground. And the only people getting paid in this one is Walmart and Amazon.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, a year later, I'm right. Everyone else was wrong.
Yeah, it's been a trip. It's almost like I didn't believe it that it was even on the table, something like this. And that's just my narrow imagination, apparently, at least at the time.
It's naivety because you've probably not been to a lot of other countries.
Yeah. Oh, I'm okay with that answer.
I'm not holding it against you. I'm just saying, a lot of Americans have this naive thought process because they've never seen what governments do on a day-to-day basis in other countries. And, so they think, oh, okay, well, in my country, you can't do that. Yeah, they can. We just learned.
Yeah, I just don't think I took it seriously because I interpreted it all through the lens of my job, and I was actually and I'm not joking when I say this. It was in January, and I was like joking around with the person who was in my like cube. We had like 2 cubes in like a little office type room, and I was joking around with her, and I was saying like, I can't wait till we get the first case of COVID in Philadelphia, because the second they do, they're going to overreact, and we're going to get to work from home, and I don't have to come into the office for like 3 weeks, and it's going to be awesome. and I was like, I love working from home. I hate getting up, getting ready, and then taking the subway and going in the office. It's just not worth my time. And I think I was just so painted by that. I didn't understand that it was going to be such an existential risk. And then by the time summer rolled around and they started extending things, I was like, dude, this is never going to end. Because every time in the city I'm in, it'd be like 2 weeks till that it would expire, and they'd be like, yeah, we're going to add another month to that. Yeah. And it was just never ending. And then the George Floyd stuff happened, and then I truly understood. I'm like, yeah, no, this is indefinite. Yeah. And from the start, I remember like the first day Philadelphia went on lockdown, there was reports from, I want to say, Iceland, and they had done their first like widespread evaluation of people that they tested a ton of people, and they had their mortality rate, and it was like a 0.2% if you looked at the whole population mortality rate. And I was like, this is not the Black Plague. Once people realize it's not 10 out of 100 people they know dying, it's more like 2 out of 1,000, and it's going to be old people. Like, everybody's going to get it. And then nobody got it. And people still don't get it. Like right. 23 people in the city I'm in, under 35, have died. And I'm in one of the biggest cities in the United States. Yep. So it's like, this is not an existential risk for a ton of people. So.
Well, and here's the other thing, and I'll add to that, is that they're pushing this vaccine like I've never seen anything like this, as far as government and corporations and everyone working together to push you to go get the Fauci ouchie. Let's put it that way. YouTube's a little pissy when you say certain things. Yeah. But my point being is that they're pushing it like in a way that I've never understood. And look, I understand biology enough that I looked into the vaccine, mRNA, mRNA vaccine. I looked into it. All these people are like, oh, it's going to change your genetics and your DNA. I'm like, no, it won't. It can't. You fucking idiots. Like, read something. Like, it only goes in one direction. It's only going to become protein. That's it. You know what I mean? So I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned about the vaccine. If you want to get the vaccine, go ahead, whatever. What I am concerned about is all of their trials were only for efficacy, not for safety. And so a lot of these people that they're pushing to like, oh, even if you had COVID, go get the vaccine. That shit is dangerous. Don't do that. Like, you could die. That's dumb. Don't do that.
So the only, I think, interesting take I have on it, I have on the whole, on this whole front, I'll be careful with the words I use, but a lot of times we talk about policy and then we realize that the elite class is wrong about it. So if we're like, the Federal Reserve saying this and it's wrong.
Almost always.
but usually we can point to the agenda that supports whatever they're pushing.
Right. True.
And the whole, and this is why I'm skeptical a little bit about just the broad conversation, is when this is relevant to what was going on with the libertarian community last week. We have Dave Smith trending and libertarians trending because they're saying things that are anti-vaccine passport. And then all that happens is a bunch of people go, hey, look, let's dunk on the libertarians because they're the new anti-vaxxers. Yeah. And my whole life as a young person, but when I was growing up, like when I first knew anything about politics as like a 12-year-old, it was like, oh, look, dumb anti-vaxxers, haha, and then clips of them or whatever. And it's like, that's like my first introduction to politics. So the fact that the only thing I can point to in terms of an agenda is the negative stigma that comes with being against something like this makes me more likely to be pro that vaccine, because I don't understand what they would do that is bad in it.
Well, you have to understand, Dave Smith's not against the vaccine. Yeah. And most of us that were like blown up and screaming about this, it's not about the vaccine. Yeah, it's about the papers. You got to keep your health papers.
Yeah. But it's also because we're afraid that we're going to have to get it if a bunch of other people get it, and because the government has kind of programmed them, then we're going to have to do it to go along, or else we're screwed.
Make
And
me.
yeah. And like, I'm with you. I'm not in a rush to get it at all. Like, I couldn't care less because of what I just said about how like nobody in my age group dies from it, and I'm healthy. So it's like I have no reason to care at all. I have no reason to wear a mask. Like, but I also think there's a lot of bogus other narratives related to everything. But with all that said, it's just like I feel like we're making an unenforced error because they've set up the narrative in a way for us to be principled and stick to our script. We have to start yelling about something that is like the most stigmatized thing. So it's like so I'm all for ANCAPs and libertarians being very radical, but it's almost like I agree that this is the hill to die on, because I think pretty much every hill is a hill to die on. I'm just worried that it's just going to be something dumb that will be referenced for the next decade because haha, look, they can because in 10 years, what do we expect the bad consequences of the bad vaccine to be? Like, are we going to be like, hey, look, the smart people didn't get it?
True. You know? I think the problem with it is, first of all, I'll reiterate, I don't care. If you want to get the vaccine, absolutely go and do it. If you don't want to get it, don't get it. It doesn't matter. I think the problem is that they're pushing this weird narrative now that, well, actually, okay, I don't care about the narrative. The narrative doesn't mean shit to me.
Okay.
They're pushing a caste system.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically trying to set it up that if you don't have the vaccine and you don't got your health papers, you're going to be second-class citizen. You may not be able to do, I'm sure you saw the viral video that psycho on CNN that was like, well, these people are just going and doing their freedoms.
Yeah.
And like, we have to stop them. We have to, and I'm like, what the? I mean, they're just saying the silent part out loud now. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's going on.
So maybe the agenda that I'm thinking that they have isn't something like that the vaccines have anything wrong with them, but it's that knowing that the government skeptic people. Okay, I have to take two broad steps back and then reframe it. So if we're talking about the left, there's like a type of cultural dominance that they have. And as peaceful as they pretend to be, because every leftist is a hippie or whatever,
not peaceful.
But in their mind they are peaceful, and we are all very aware they're not peaceful.
They just burnt 200 cities to the ground last year.
I agree. But in their mind, they're somehow the peaceful ones, and because they want this cultural agreement that they frame as tolerance, but it's really like they want you to get on board with it. So what I perceive them doing is they're setting up a way for us to self-select ourselves out of their world to some degree, because this is how they employ soft fascism. And this goes to what's happening in Georgia right now with the election law. It's like, we're going to boycott Coke because Coke didn't take a political stance. And it's like, why? It's like, well, it's the caste system that you're talking about. Because it's like, we can't just say everybody's free. We need to put cultural dominance, and our ideas have to be front and center. And then if you and I are like, well, I don't really see how I'm at risk for anything, I don't really want to get the ouchie.
Especially if you're vaccinated, how do I put you at risk?
Well, no, dude, I agree with you. I'm on board with anything.
I mean, this is like, when did America lose logic? That's what confuses me.
Well, have we? I mean, as far as I know, well before I was born, we didn't have very good logic.
That's fair.
So
I knew where you were going before you even said it. Yeah, that's fair. Anyway, my apologies. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
So I think that the whole thing around coronavirus, if we wanted to ascribe a more if we wanted to ascribe a malicious intent to the government's policies, I'm not talking about the virus, I'm talking about the government's policies. It's to set up people like us who are actually thinking about it and saying, isn't it weird that you're stripping people's freedom because a very small select group of the population is at risk? It's like, well, it's easy to identify people that are upset that they can't go and do things. And then when those people out themselves as upset, you can say, oh, they're unapproved. You can pull those people off 3x5 card. And I think that I think that's something that a lot of us intrinsically know, and I think that's why a
Yeah.
lot of
Oh,
us
yeah.
were so upset
For
about the
sure.
Joe Jorgensen thing because she didn't talk about lockdowns, and it's like
Yeah.
this is
Like,
clearly the soft fascism, right?
well, because the Georgia thing, and you're 100%. And my biggest thing is like, this is like that to me was a libertarian moment to go just scream to the rafters. Absolutely not. That doesn't matter. We cannot allow this to happen. Like, stop it. You know what I mean? But, and a lot of people even said, okay, well, I gave them the 15 days, right? Like, all right, fine. We don't really know what's happening kind of situation. Even libertarians can be smart enough to take a break, right? For a couple of minutes and see what happens. Sure. But
Well,
15 days was 130. What was 132 days ago, or 1 year and 32 days ago? We're not like, what is happening? You know what I mean? But that was my point, was that you people had an opportunity, you failed miserably, and that's why I was completely on board with. I don't care if Kentucky's tweet was disconcerting to people, because I'm like, look, we missed the point when it came to the lockdowns in the first place, right? Don't miss it again with these fucking passports, because these passports are not going to be just for COVID. That they always take and take and take and take. Look at the TSA. The TSA can molest you at the airport. There's not shit you can do about it if you want to get on there.
Well, and when has the government rolled back anything they put into place, like in any time in recent history? And it's like virtually never. Yeah, yeah, right. It's like that was too bad.
How far back you have to go when they decided it was easier to just let people drink than it was to poison them. Which, by the way, any of you people that watch this video, the U.S. government poisoned people. They poisoned them on purpose during Prohibition. So yeah, that was their last rollback.
Yeah. So when you put that in context, then 2 weeks to slow the spread is pretty silly to actually believe it only lasts 2 weeks. I think I'm on board with you there. And there was a time where it's like a reasonable person who is just has the conservative ethos of caution, right? Of someone who wants to hear something out, but in the process of decision making. In that 2 week period, you could talk to somebody and it's just like, hey, we haven't seen this in our country. We don't know our underlying risks. We don't know how bad this is going to be. And then it's like, okay, you can be reasonable about it. It's like, I still am not and you and I are in favor of government force in those uncertain circumstances. But you can to some extent understand that thinking. Now that we're this far past, it's almost like if anybody's really informed on it, you feel like they're either lying or they're programmed. And it's just hard to talk people out of that. And that's why whenever I talk to somebody, I more emphasize like, hey, you should just look at the CDC numbers. Because if you haven't looked at them in a while and looked at the actual breakdowns of it, then it paints a different narrative than what you hear.
Because like most of the people in Texas are still alive. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, because everybody knows that older people are more at risk, but they are starkly more at risk. Like it is. It's much more alarmingly stark.
It's so bad that it's like, they died from COVID. I'm like, they died because they're 80.
Yeah.
COVID was the straw that broke the old man's back, so to speak.
Yeah.
But come on, let's can we acknowledge these people are like have a bunch of health issues because they're old as shit?
And then they kind of paint it like, oh, well, older people are at risk, but that means like people who are almost old that are like 40s or 50s are kind of close to being old, so those people should be concerned. And it's like no. People who are in their 60s are hardly dying. It's not until you get to like 75 where it's like,
you gotta get up there in the hours.
And I'm just gonna tell you, like, people don't know that. Like, people just are not aware.
Well, because they're not told that. That's the thing, is they say, oh, these people are dying. They will. I mean, if you died from it, your shit would be all over the news.
Yeah, it's like, an anomaly when somebody my age.
Young, healthy person got dead from COVID. That would be everywhere. Yeah. But the fact that the majority of people, I think it's something like, if I remember right, and I could have this wrong, so fact check it. I think it's like 72% were over 80.
That sounds right to me from the numbers I've looked at.
And I'm like, okay, well, they're just old. I mean, sure, they may have been okay for a little while. Maybe this thing did kill them. I'm not saying that it didn't. I'm just saying, like, dude, they're old. Like, but it's not a bunch of 25-year-olds dropping dead in the street. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's like I love my grandparents, but I don't see them every week, and it's just like I don't. So if I was a person in my 20s and they're like, well, if you love your grandparents, then you might give it to people like them, and it's like, well, if all those people are aware that they're high at risk, then they'll stay home, and then I won't visit them twice a year.
Right.
It's just like I'll wait.
And then I'll be very precautious when I do it.
Yeah, and then every other time,
you guys figure it out. Like, yeah.
So
that's cool. Like, I agree. Matt, we are coming up. We're just over an hour now. I usually try to keep these to about an hour because that's all the attention span most Americans have. Sometimes more, not often. So why don't you tell everyone where to find you again, and what you got going on. I know you got a couple of podcasts. We got one scrolling. I didn't know the other one, so I didn't have it scrolling. My apologies.
You're good. Okay, so I do two shows. I do the Obey podcast, which you can find on any podcatcher, and I put them on YouTube, but they're audio only. And I'm
nobody watches audio only on YouTube.
Yeah, I know. I predominantly come to things through podcasts because that was always the thing I was interested in. So it's meant to be more of an auditory podcast. That is me going on rants about the kind of stuff we've talked about, where I'll read through the news and what usually ends up happening is I'll find like 5 stories over the span of like a month, and eventually I'll realize they're all like tied together. And I'll be like, hey, have you noticed that this weird narrative is coming out this way? And then here's why it's a lie. And then here's the way that they set it up. It's stupid and it's garbage. And then it's about 25 minutes of me being pissed off, progressively getting louder as I go off about it. So it's always fun to do. It's kind of for me, but if anybody wants to give that a listen, I would definitely recommend it because I
listened to one about half of it, and I was like, this guy is like, he's very angry.
Oh yeah. I could get angry. But it depends on the episode. There have been some where I'm like, I'm very careful about explaining them, and I do them all in one take too, which is what makes them so much more fun to me. Because some people are very careful.
They're better. They're more natural.
Yeah, like this is another reason I hate NPR is it's like overproduced garbage where it's like I'm gonna put in sound effects, and I'm like,
that's why live is better. Live is better.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the Obey podcast. You can also find me on Twitter at the Obey podcast. I also post on my personal Twitter, which is at Matthew T. Keck. And the other show I do is called Beyond Talking Points, and that's on YouTube and actually has a video feed. Me and my friend, he's an anarcho-communist. He's a Marxist type. We argue about philosophy and politics and economics a lot. We end up arguing about philosophy a lot. Like we've done an episode that's all about, pretty much ends up being about the non-aggression principle, but we talk about like where rights derive and we see where we disagree with each other. And then I push him on it. I'm like, are positive rights all just arbitrary normative values? And then he has to answer. And it's like, it can get pretty, we've definitely yelled at each other before, but it's all in good spirit. And you don't see a lot of that anymore because,
you don't.
Yeah, like if you go on Twitter for 5 minutes, you can see why you don't see a lot of that.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm just going to throw this out there. There is no such thing as positive rights. You only have negative rights.
And that's what you can hear me arguing for against my buddy. So
I assumed.
Yeah.
I assumed you were the one arguing that there's only negative rights.
Exactly. So you can find that one's Beyond Talking Points. It's on all your podcatchers. It's on YouTube, and we do an episode about every week, and there's like 50 or so. So we've covered a lot of stuff at this point over the last like year or two. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's always a blast, and I'm looking forward to having you on, and I'll grill you on some things, and I like talking.
Oh, I look forward to that. I don't usually get grilled.
I'm not gonna.
I do the question asking. I'm not a huge fan of being on the other side of the table, but it'll be fun. I'll be on Matt's show on Wednesday. I don't know if it'll be live. I don't know exactly how he does that, but I'm sure he'll drop everything, and I'll help him link it all up. Y'all have a great night. appreciate you dropping in, and